Everyone walked past the lonely boy until one kind waitress gave him food. She didn't know his father was a billionaire. Then one morning, 4 black SUVs pulled up and everything changed. The bell above the door jingled as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the old diner. It was the same time every day, 3:15 sharp. Layla didn't need to glance up from the coffee pot to know who had just walked in. She'd memorized the sound of his steps, the way he quietly slid into the same corner booth, third from the back, near the jukebox no one used anymore. The boy was always alone. Layla, a black waitress with warm eyes and a voice full of honey, watched him for the first few days, waiting to see if anyone came with him. No one ever did. He couldn't have been more than 10. Small, pale, with shaggy hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. His clothes were clean, but wrinkled, and his sneakers had seen better years. The first time she approached, he startled a little, just enough to make her pause. "You all right, sugar?" she asked gently, coffee pot still in hand. He nodded but didn't speak, just looked up at her with tired eyes and then down at the crumpled dollar bills in front of him. He always ordered the same thing, a small bowl of soup and a glass of water. Layla watched him eat slowly, like he was stretching every bite. The next day, when he came in again, she added a grilled cheese to the order, said it was on the house. He blinked, then gave her the faintest smile. That was all it took. From then on, it became their silent routine. Layla made sure a plate was ready for him by the time he slid into his seat. Sometimes it was chicken and rice, other days meatloaf with mashed potatoes. Nothing fancy, just warm food made with care. She didn't ask questions, didn't press him about why he was alone or where his parents were. She just sat across from him when she had a spare minute and talked about whatever came to mind. The weather, the new cook's terrible singing, the stray cat that had started hanging around the back door. Mason, that's what he finally told her 3 weeks in. Just one word, soft and barely audible, when she asked what name to put on the piece of pie she packed for him to take home. "Well, Mason," she smiled, "you're always welcome here." He looked at her then, eyes lingering for a second longer than usual, like he wasn't sure how to respond to kindness. Then he nodded once, tightly, and went back to eating. The other waitresses took notice, whispering in the back. But Layla didn't care. She knew what it was like to need someone and not have anyone. So every day, she made sure that booth was ready, the food was hot, and her smile was genuine. Because sometimes, kindness was the only thing a person had to give. And Mason kept coming back, quiet, alone, but never hungry. The days blurred into a quiet rhythm, and Layla began to look forward to 3:15 like clockwork. Mason still didn't say much, but there was a comfort to his silence, a steady presence that made the diner feel just a little warmer. She noticed the way he always brought a small backpack with him and how he placed it gently beside him before eating. One Wednesday afternoon, as she refilled his water, Layla dared to break the silence. "You draw, Mason?" she asked, glancing at the worn notebook poking out of his bag. Mason hesitated, then gave a small nod. She smiled. "That's a talent, you know. I used to doodle flowers on napkins here when I first started." Drove the boss crazy. His lips twitched, almost a smile. It was a beginning. That Friday, he stayed a little longer than usual. Layla noticed him dragging his spoon through his mashed potatoes, slower than usual, head tilted down. She slid into the booth across from him, careful not to spook him. "You okay, baby?" He looked up, eyes cloudy. Then softly, he whispered, "My mom, she's gone." Layla's heart squeezed. The words were few, but the weight behind them was heavy. She didn't ask how or why, just reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. "I'm real sorry, Mason," she said quietly. "I bet she loved you a whole lot." He didn't answer, just nodded again, then went back to eating. But after that day, something shifted. He started looking up when she greeted him, gave her those small, quiet nods that felt like trust in motion. He never brought money, and she never asked for any. Layla knew how to stretch $1, and feeding one small boy each day didn't cost her much. What it gave her, though, was priceless. The following Monday, as she cleared his plate, Mason reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out to her with both hands, eyes on the floor. Layla took it gently, unfolding it. It was a drawing, rough, childlike, but full of heart. A table with 2 people, one with curly hair and a pink apron, the other with a backpack and a smile. Above them, written in crooked letters, "Thank you, Miss Layla." Tears burned in her eyes. "Did you draw this for me?" she asked. He finally looked up, a flicker of pride in his eyes, and nodded. Layla pressed the paper to her chest. "I'm gonna keep this forever, you hear?" For the first time since she'd met him, Mason smiled. It wasn't wide or toothy, just a quiet curve of the lips, but it lit his whole face. That afternoon, as he packed up his things, he looked back at her before leaving. "See you tomorrow," he said softly. Layla just watched him go, heart full. She didn't know why the boy came. She just knew she'd be there, waiting. By the 3rd week, Mason had become part of of the diner's heartbeat. Regulars noticed him, some with a smile, others with the usual small-town suspicion. But Layla kept serving him with the same warmth and extra fries. Still, the more she watched him, the more questions stirred in her chest. She noticed how he never had a phone. No one ever called or picked him up. He always came and left alone. A child like that, no older than 8 or 9, should have had someone hovering. Parent, a guardian. But there was never a trace of either. One afternoon, after Mason left, Layla caught herself watching the door a moment too long. The bell jingled softly behind him, but her eyes stayed fixed on the glass. "Something on your mind, Layla?" came a voice behind her. It was Joe, the diner owner. Bald, mustached, always wiping something with the same stained rag. He'd run the place for over 20 years, knew every face in town, and noticed when something didn't sit right. She hesitated, then leaned over the counter, speaking low. "That little boy, Mason. You ever wonder why he's always alone?" Joe looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. "You mean the quiet one with the backpack?" "Yeah, him. He ever come in with anyone?" Joe shook his head slowly. "Not once, but he pays every time. Crisp $100 bills like clockwork. Leaves enough to cover the plate 5 times over. Never says a word, just hands him over." Layla blinked. "Hundreds." He nodded. "Thought maybe you knew. I assumed he was one of your church kids or something." He's got that sad look. Her stomach turned a little. Mason never once offered to pay her, and she never asked. She'd figured he was just a broke kid trying to make it through the day. But $100 bills? That didn't sit right. "I've been feeding him for free," she murmured, more to herself than Joe. Joe raised an eyebrow. "Well, he clearly doesn't need charity." "You sure you're not being hustled, Layla?" She shook her head firmly. "No, that boy's not a liar. He's hurt. I can feel it. But now I'm wondering, who's giving him that kind of money? And why hasn't anyone come looking for him?" Joe didn't answer, just went back to wiping down the counter, though his eyes had lost some of their usual calm. Layla turned back toward the empty booth where Mason always sat. The sugar packets he liked to fidget with were still piled neatly by the napkin holder. She thought of the picture he gave her, the way he looked down when he said his mom was gone. Something wasn't adding up. The next afternoon, she waited by the door 5 minutes earlier than usual. When Mason walked in, she smiled as always, but this time, a quiet urgency stirred beneath her warmth. She needed to know more, because this wasn't just a lonely boy anymore. It was starting to feel like a secret waiting to be uncovered. The morning began like any other. The clink of coffee cups, the hiss of the griddle, and the low hum of old soul music filled the diner. Layla tied her apron and greeted the early regulars, her smile practiced but gentle. But just as she reached for the coffee pot, a deep rumble broke the rhythm. Engines. Not one, not two, but several. The noise grew louder until it swallowed the diner's calm. Layla turned toward the front window, brows furrowing. Outside, four sleek black SUVs rolled to a slow, synchronized stop across the street. They gleamed like oil under the morning sun, tinted windows hiding whatever or whoever was inside. The room quieted. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Forks hovered mid-air. Even the cook peeked out from the kitchen doorway, wiping his hands on his apron. Layla stepped closer to the window, heart picking up. This wasn't a tourist stop. It was a quiet town, a small diner, and this was something else entirely. The driver doors opened in unison. Four tall men in black suits stepped out, clean-cut, stone-faced, all wearing earpieces. They didn't speak to each other, just scanned the street before heading toward the diner. Layla felt the air shift. Tension swept through the room like a cold breeze. The bell above the door jingled as the first man stepped inside. The other three followed, spreading out with purpose. Their gazes swept across every booth and table, but none of them spoke. They didn't ask for menus, didn't look hungry. They were looking for someone, and Layla already knew who. Mason hadn't arrived yet. His usual seat by the window sat empty, a folded napkin still tucked in the syrup bottle from the day before. One of the men paused in front of it, eyes narrowing slightly. Layla moved toward them, slowly, carefully. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The tallest of the four turned toward her. His voice was calm, rehearsed. "We're not here to cause trouble." She crossed her arms. "Then why do you look like you're about to?" The man ignored the question. He glanced back at the booth. "Does a boy sit here? About 9 or 10 years old. Comes in alone. Small build. Wears a navy backpack." Layla's throat tightened. She didn't answer right away. The man took out a photo and held it up. It was Mason. His eyes were brighter in the picture, his cheeks rounder. A different version of the boy she'd grown used to. "We need to speak with him," the man said, lowering the photo. "Is he expected today?" Layla's hands stayed at her sides, but her fingers curled into fists. The bell jingled again. Heads turned. Mason had just stepped through the door, eyes wide and confused as the whole diner turned to him. The man in the suit gave the smallest nod to his team. Layla Layla's heart dropped. Whatever this was, the day had just changed forever. The lunch rush had come and gone, but Layla couldn't shake the heaviness that lingered in the diner. The men in suits had left shortly after Mason, saying little and taking even less. The photo still played in her mind. Mason, happier, healthier, a child wrapped in comfort. The boy she knew was quiet, distant, and clearly running from something. She wiped down the counter again, though it was already spotless. Then the bell over the door rang. Layla looked up, expecting a regular or maybe a curious neighbor. Instead, a tall man in a gray coat stepped inside. No entourage, no flash, just him. He moved like someone who didn't need to announce who he was. His tailored clothes, calm composure, and striking features caught every pair of eyes in the room. Conversations halted again. Layla's eyes narrowed. He didn't belong here. He walked straight up to the counter. "Layla, right?" She blinked. "Yeah, who's asking?" "Alex Hartwell," he said. He extended a hand, but she didn't take it. The name clicked immediately. Billionaire, tech genius, one of the wealthiest men in the country. The kind of man who showed up on magazine covers, not in greasy spoon diners. He didn't seem fazed by her coldness. "I'd like a word, in private if that's all right." Layla hesitated. "Why?" He gave a small nod toward the back hallway. "Please." The other customers were still staring. Curiosity buzzed in the air like static. With a slow exhale, she led him past the kitchen and into the tiny office used for breaks. She crossed her arms as she leaned against the doorframe. "Talk." Alex glanced around, then looked directly at her. "The boy you've been feeding, Mason, he's my son." Layla felt the words hit her like a gust of wind. She stared at him, unblinking. "What?" "He ran away from home a few weeks ago," Alex continued. "Security traced him here after a tutor mentioned he'd been seen nearby. We've been watching carefully." Her stomach churned. "You've been watching me?" He held up his hand. "Just enough to make sure he was safe. Nothing invasive. We saw how you treated him. The way you looked out for him without asking questions." She didn't respond, but her jaw clenched. "I owe you a thank you," Alex added quietly. Layla shook her head, trying to absorb everything. "He never said anything about family, about money. He barely talks." Alex's eyes dropped for a moment. "He's hurting. His mother passed last year. Things haven't been easy." Layla's expression softened, just a little. "I just wanted to say thank you," he repeated, "for feeding him, for seeing him when no one else did." She stayed quiet, still unsure what to make of the man standing in front of her. Alex gave a slight nod, then stepped past her. He paused at the door. "He trusts you," he said. "That means something." And just like that, he left. The next morning, the diner was quieter than usual. A light drizzle tapped the windows, and the scent of fresh biscuits filled the air. Layla moved through her shift like normal, but her thoughts lingered on the man from yesterday. Alex Hartwell, billionaire, father, stranger. She was refilling a coffee cup when the bell over the door chimed again. She turned, half expecting someone new, but there he was, Alex, dressed more casually today in jeans and a dark sweater. Still polished, still out of place. Layla sighed and set the pot down. "Back already?" Alex smiled faintly. "Mind if we talk again?" She gestured toward a booth in the corner, away from the few customers scattered around. He slid into the seat, hands folded on the table. "You don't waste time, do you?" she asked, sliding in across from him. "I don't believe in wasting it," he replied, "especially when there's something important to say." Layla crossed her arms, waiting. "I want to thank you," Alex said slowly, "for treating my son like a person, not a project, not a headline, just a boy." Layla looked down at the table, then back at him. "He is just a boy, a quiet, sweet one who needed someone to notice him." Alex nodded. "Exactly. Most people either push him away or try to fix him. You didn't do either." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek envelope. "This is just a small gesture. A thank you." He placed it on the table between them. Layla didn't touch it. "What's in it?" "A check," he said plainly. $50,000. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "For what?" "For being kind when no one else was." Layla's voice was steady, but her hands curled into loose fists on her lap. "So now kindness has a price tag? That's not what this is." She pushed the envelope back toward him. "I didn't help Mason for money." Alex looked surprised. "I know. That's why I'm offering it. That boy sat in my section every day, eating pancakes and pretending not to be sad. He didn't need money, Mr. Hartwell. He needed someone to see him." Alex didn't answer at first. The rain outside grew heavier, blurring the world behind the windows. "I just thought," he began. "Well, you thought wrong," she interrupted gently. "Don't turn this into something transactional. It cheapens what matters." He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "You're right." Layla exhaled and leaned back against the booth. "If you really want to thank me, just make sure he's okay. That's all I care about." Alex picked up the envelope and slipped it back into his his coat. I will. As he stood to leave, he glanced at her once more. You're one of the few people who didn't ask for anything. Layla smiled, just a little. Maybe that's why he kept coming back. It started with a coffee. Alex Hartwell walked into the diner the next day, alone again, wearing the same unsure expression he'd had when he first asked to speak with Layla. He didn't sit in the corner. Instead, he chose a booth one row behind where Mason usually sat. Layla noticed right away but didn't say anything. She just poured his coffee and asked, "You want cream this time?" Alex gave a small smile, still learning how to drink it like a real person. She smirked. Well, real people like cream too. That was the first morning. He left before Mason came in, but the next day he came again. This time he stayed longer, sipping his coffee slowly, occasionally glancing toward the door. And then Mason walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair a little damp from the rain. He paused when he saw his father. The hesitation was brief, but it stung. Mason's eyes dropped to the floor. He shuffled to his usual seat like nothing had changed. Alex didn't move toward him, just gave a slight nod. Layla served Mason his usual plate, grilled cheese, extra fries, and slid a small note under his napkin. Mason opened it while pretending not to. In neat handwriting, it read, "He's trying." He didn't smile, but he didn't leave either. This routine continued for the next week. Alex would show up first, always awkward, always unsure. Mason would follow, silent and stubborn, pretending not to notice his father just a few feet away. Layla became the bridge neither of them asked for. She'd serve one and glance toward the other, offer a refill here, a warm meal there, and every now and then, a quiet word or a scribbled note to nudge the space between them smaller. One afternoon, after a long silence, Alex stood and walked slowly toward Mason's table. Layla watched from behind the counter, holding her breath. "Mason," Alex said softly. The boy didn't look up. "I know I messed up," he continued. "I should have been there sooner." Mason's fork scraped his plate, but he said nothing. Alex sighed, ran a hand through his hair. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." He waited 1 second, 2, then turned to leave. "Can you sit over there?" Mason mumbled, pointing to the other side of the booth. Alex blinked, then nodded. He slid into the seat across from his son. Layla watched as the two sat together, not talking much, not even looking at each other, but sitting, sharing space. It wasn't much, but it was something. She returned to wiping the counter, hiding her smile. A father was trying. A son wasn't running. And sometimes healing didn't roar, it whispered. The tension had been building all week. Alex had been trying, truly trying, but he pushed too hard that morning. Layla wasn't there to soften the exchange. It was just father and son in the diner, the quiet hum of the jukebox in the background. "You can't keep skipping your lessons," Alex said, voice too sharp for a peaceful morning. Mason stared at his plate, unmoved. "I didn't ask for lessons. I just wanted to eat. You don't understand. These tutors are—" "I don't care," Mason snapped, the words cutting through the air. "You only care now because someone told you to." Alex froze. "That's not true." But Mason was already standing. "You don't know me. You're just pretending." The door slammed behind him before Alex could say another word. By the time Layla arrived for her shift, Alex was pacing outside, his hands shaking slightly. "He's gone," he muttered. "He just walked out and disappeared." Layla didn't panic. She looked around, then gently guided Alex inside. "When exactly did he leave?" 15 minutes ago. I tried to follow, but he vanished down the street." She nodded, thinking quickly. "You said anything to upset him?" "I pushed him. I shouldn't have," Alex admitted. Layla sighed. "He needs space when he's hurting, not pressure." Without waiting for a reply, she grabbed her coat. "I think I know where he went." Alex followed her out as she walked quickly down the sidewalk, turning at a corner with a quiet determination. Her steps led them to a small park just 2 blocks from the diner. Run-down swings, an old wooden bench, and a cracked path under trees that whispered with the breeze. "I used to come here with my mom," Layla said quietly as they walked. "I told Mason about it once. Said it was the only place that made me feel safe when I was little." Sure enough, on the far end of the park, they spotted him, Mason, hunched on the swing, his backpack at his feet, arms wrapped around his legs. Alex took a step forward, but Layla touched his arm. "Let me." She approached gently, sitting on the swing next to him. "Hey, sugar." Mason sniffled but didn't look up. "I didn't mean to yell." "I know," she said, "and I know your dad can be a little much sometimes, but he's trying." "Mason, he doesn't get it," he whispered. Layla looked at him, soft but firm. "Maybe not yet, but he wants to, and people don't try for things they don't care about." Mason glanced up. His eyes found his dad's, waiting at a distance, hands in pockets, face drawn with worry. "Come on," Layla said, standing and holding out her hand. "Let's go home." Mason hesitated, then took it. Slowly, the three of them walked back toward the diner. Together, no words needed. They walked the rest of the way in silence, but it wasn't the awkward kind. It was thoughtful, full of things neither of them had said yet. Layla stayed close to Mason's side while Alex trailed just behind, unsure how to step in without stepping on the fragile ground between them. Back at the diner, the mid-morning rush had died down. Layla led them to a quiet booth in the corner. She slid into the seat across from Mason, while Alex stood for a moment then slowly joined. "I'm sorry," Alex said, voice low, "for everything." Mason didn't look at him right away. He fiddled with a napkin, twisting it in his fingers. "You always say sorry," he mumbled. Alex's shoulders sank. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I've built companies, stood on stages, solved problems worth billions, but when it comes to you, I don't even know how to have a real conversation." Mason glanced up, surprised by the honesty. "I thought throwing money at things would fix it. Tutors, schools, doctors, but I forgot to be your dad." Layla stayed quiet, watching the moment unfold. Mason's voice was small but firm. "Layla listens. You don't." It hit harder than any boardroom criticism Alex had ever heard. He swallowed hard and looked at Layla, eyes glassy. "You've given him something I couldn't. You saw him when I didn't." Layla gave a small shrug. "I didn't do much, just treated him like a person." "No," Alex said, shaking his head. "You did what I didn't know how to. You made him feel safe." He turned to Mason. "If you want her in your life, then so do I. Layla, would you?" He hesitated, unsure how to phrase something so delicate. Mason spoke first. "Can she still be at the diner?" Layla chuckled softly. "I'll always be at the diner, baby." "But what are you asking, Alex?" Alex took a breath. "Would you consider being more involved in Mason's life? Beyond just serving pancakes and sneaking him extra syrup? Maybe helping me learn how to be a better father?" Layla blinked, the question sinking in. She glanced at Mason, whose face for once looked peaceful. "Open. I ain't no expert," she said gently, "but I can be here. For him. For both of y'all." Alex nodded, grateful. "That's all I'm asking." Mason reached for his juice, sipping quietly before saying, "Can we go to the park again tomorrow?" Layla smiled. "Of course, sugar." Alex looked over, hopeful. "Can I come too?" Mason didn't answer right away, but then he gave a tiny nod. It wasn't everything, but it was something, and sometimes something was more than enough. The bell over the diner door jingled just like always, but the place felt different now, warmer, fuller, like it had taken a deep breath and finally exhaled. Layla wiped down the counter as the morning sun streamed through the windows, casting golden stripes across the checkered floor. Alex walked in right on cue, wearing jeans instead of a tailored suit. He still looked like a man who owned empires, but today he just looked like a dad. "Morning, boss," Layla teased, tossing him a playful glance over her shoulder. He grinned. "You know I only signed the papers. You run this place." The diner had officially changed hands 2 weeks ago. Alex had bought it not to tear it down or renovate it into something unrecognizable, but to preserve it. Layla's diner remained Layla's diner. Same booths, same coffee pots, same grease-stained menus. But now, there was something new in the back room. A quiet reading space with soft beanbags, donated books, and a little wooden sign that read, "For the kids who need a quiet corner." Mason had helped paint it. "Where is he?" Layla asked, glancing toward the kitchen. Alex pointed to the back, pride shining in his eyes. "Organizing the shelf again. Says the mystery books should be on their own row." Layla laughed. "Sounds about right." The bell rang again, and Mason came out holding a stack of books nearly as tall as his head. He placed them gently on the front counter and flashed a grin at Layla. "Done." She reached over and ruffled his hair. "You're a machine, baby." Every evening now, the three of them sat at the same booth, corner seat, near the window. Layla brought out dinner, Alex brought stories, and Mason brought that quiet, thoughtful spark that had first drawn her in. Tonight was no different. As the diner's regulars trickled out and the open sign flipped to closed, Layla set down 3 plates at the booth. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, Mason's favorite. They ate with easy conversation, laughter filling the room like a song only they could hear. Alex looked up midway through dinner. "You ever think we'd end up here?" Layla smiled, setting her fork down. "Not in a million years, but I'm glad we did." Mason leaned against her shoulder, full and happy. "Me too." Silence fell, but not an empty one. The kind that wraps around people when there's nothing left to prove. Outside, the neon sign buzzed softly. Inside, the table stayed full, 3 chairs, 3 lives, stitched together not by blood or duty, but by something deeper. Kindness, a second chance, a warm plate when it mattered most. And in that little diner on the edge of town, a new kind of family had quietly formed. One evening, one meal, one heart at a time. Have you you ever helped someone without knowing their story? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content.